The kingdom that vanished between two heartbeats. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills of Eldara, casting a golden light upon the mist that wrapped the valley. Birds sang softly, their songs echoing through the forest. Everything seemed peaceful, too peaceful, perhaps, for a world that once carried the memory of a kingdom that had vanished in the blink of an eye. A young woman named Lyra stood by the riverbank, her reflection rippling on the water's surface. She was a healer in the small village of Dareth, a quiet place surrounded by ruins that no one remembered the names of anymore. Every morning, Lyra came to the river not just to collect water, but to listen. She believed the wind carried whispers from the past, voices that spoke of the lost kingdom of Elyndor, a land that had disappeared long before she was born. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about it when she was a child. One day, Elyndor stood tall, full of music and laughter, her grandmother would say. But in the space between two heartbeats, it was gone. The castles turned to mist, the people turned to shadows, and time forgot their names. No one in the village believed those stories anymore. They said they were fairy tales meant to keep children entertained. But Lyra had always felt something different, a pull, as if the ruins around her were watching, waiting. That morning, the wind felt strange. It moved through the trees with a low hum, and for the first time, Lyra heard something beneath it, faint voices calling her name. Lyra, the sound made her drop her water jug. It shattered on the stones. Her heart raced as she looked around. No one was there. Only the forest, silent and still. Yet the voice came again, closer this time. Lyra, the heart of Elyndor beat still. Terrified, she ran back toward the village, her feet kicking up dust. When she reached the edge of Dareth, she saw Eamon, a young blacksmith and her closest friend, hammering metal outside his small workshop. His arms were strong, his face marked by the soot of his trade, but his eyes softened when he saw her. "Lyra, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I did," she said, her voice trembling. "Down by the river, I heard voices." Eamon frowned. "The forest plays tricks. You know that. Don't go listening to old tales." "I'm not imagining things, Eamon." The voice said something about Elyndor. At the sound of that name, Eamon's hammer froze midair. For a moment, something unreadable flickered across his face. Then he forced a smile. "You've been reading too many of your grandmother's stories," he said. "Come, let's eat. You can tell me what you think you heard." But as they walked back to the village square, Lyra noticed the strange way he avoided her eyes. She had known Eamon all her life, yet suddenly, he seemed distant, as if he carried secrets he had no wish to share. That night, the air grew heavy and cold. The moon hung low, veiled by clouds. Lyra couldn't sleep. The voice kept echoing in her head. So she lit a lantern and opened the old chest her grandmother had left her. Inside were bits of parchment, yellowed with age, covered in faded ink. One piece caught her attention, a map. It showed the valley as it was now, but faintly beneath it, another set of markings, symbols, lines, and words in a language she didn't know. At the bottom, written in her grandmother's hand, were 5 words. "The heart sleeps beneath the river." Lyra's breath caught. The river. The same place where she'd heard the voice. As she traced the words, the lantern flickered, and the shadows in the room shifted. For an instant, she thought she saw someone standing by her window, a tall figure cloaked in mist, watching her. When she blinked, it was gone. The next morning, Lyra went to find Eamon again. He was sharpening his tools, his expression grim. "Eamon," she began softly, "I found something. My grandmother left a map. It says the heart of Elyndor lies beneath the river." He looked up sharply. "You should burn that map, Lyra."
"What? Why?"
"Because there are things in these lands better left forgotten," he said, his voice suddenly hard. "Elyndor fell for a reason. You don't want to wake what sleeps beneath." Lyra felt anger rise within her. "You sound like you know something." Eamon hesitated, then lowered his voice. "My family once served in Elyndor. We were guardians of the Forge of Souls, a weapon the king created to protect the realm. But it was never meant to exist. The night the kingdom vanished, the forge shattered the veil between worlds. Everything was consumed in one heartbeat. That's what the old stories don't tell. Lyra stared at him, speechless. So you knew it was real? I wish I didn't, he whispered. The ground trembled then, just slightly. The sound of the river in the distance grew louder, as if something beneath it had stirred. Eamon looked toward the valley. It's starting again, he said. What is? The heartbeat. That night, the sky changed. The stars began to flicker, one by one, as though the heavens themselves were breathing. A silver mist rolled across the fields, swallowing the village in silence. Lyra stood at her window, clutching the map, as a faint glow rose from the river like moonlight made liquid. Something was waking, and in the space between two heartbeats, the air seemed to shiver, as if the world remembered something it had long tried to forget. The dawn after the trembling night came gray and quiet. The mist that had rolled over Dareth refused to leave, hanging low like a ghost that had forgotten its way home. The villagers spoke in uneasy whispers, their faces pale as they recalled strange dreams, dreams of golden towers, of oceans of light, and of a voice calling from beneath the earth. Lyra woke to find her window rimmed with frost, though it was the middle of spring. She could still hear the faint rhythm in the distance, a deep, slow pulse, like a giant heartbeat buried beneath the ground. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and went to find Eamon. He was already at the edge of the village, looking toward the river with a sword strapped to his back. It was old, covered with strange runes that glimmered faintly in the mist. You felt it too, didn't you? Lyra asked quietly. Eamon nodded. The old power is stirring. If we don't stop it now, Dareth will vanish just like Elyndor did. Lyra's hands trembled. Then we have to go. The map, my grandmother's note, it all points to the river. Eamon hesitated, his jaw tightening. If we go there, we may not return. Then I'll go alone, Lyra said firmly. He looked at her, the fear in his eyes softening into something else, respect, perhaps, or sorrow. No, he said after a moment. You won't go alone. Together, they walked through the forest toward the river. The mist grew thicker with every step. Birds no longer sang. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. When they reached the riverbank, the air shimmered faintly, and the water reflected not the sky, but a city, its towers made of crystal, and its streets lined with gold. Lyra gasped. Elyndor. The reflection rippled and faded as a voice echoed softly through the air. The heart still beats. The seal is weakening. Eamon drew his sword, his eyes scanning the mist. Who's there? The water stirred, and from it rose a figure, tall, cloaked in silver, her face hidden by a veil of light. Her voice was calm, yet carried the weight of centuries. I am Seraphine, guardian of the river gate. You stand upon the threshold of Elyndor's heart. Lyra took a cautious step forward. You know about the kingdom that vanished? Seraphine's head tilted slightly. I was its protector. I held the gate closed when the veil broke. But the seal weakens with each passing age. You, child of the healer's line, have awakened it. Me? Lyra whispered. I only followed a voice. That voice was the heart calling, Seraphine said. It senses your blood, descendant of the one who bound it. If it fully awakens, it will consume this land again. Lyra looked at Eamon in confusion. What does she mean? Eamon's expression darkened. Your grandmother, she wasn't just a healer, was she? Seraphine answered for her.
No.
She was the last of the keepers, the ones who bound the Forge of Souls beneath the river. But the bond was tied to blood. When she died, the chain began to break. The wind howled suddenly, and the river surged upward, forming a column of silver light that pulsed like a living thing. Lyra clutched her chest, feeling her heart beat in rhythm with it. Seraphine's voice rose above the roar. The heart seeks you, Lyra of Dareth. If you do not face it, the heartbeat will quicken, and the world will fall into the same silence that swallowed Elyndor. Eamon stepped in front of her, his sword glowing faintly. Then tell us how to stop it, Seraphine's light dimmed. To seal it again, the heir of the keepers must journey to the ruins of the crystal spire. There, beneath the moon's light, the heart can be stilled, but only through a sacrifice of memory. She must give up what she holds most dear. Lyra's throat tightened. My memories? The heart feeds on remembrance, Seraphine said. When Elyndor fell, its people chose to forget their pain. That is why the kingdom vanished. It was erased by its own wish to be free from sorrow. The words hung heavy in the air. Lyra tried to speak but found none. Aemon placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll go, he said quietly. Seraphine bowed her head. Then take this. From the air, she drew a small shard of light that solidified into a crystal pendant. It will guide you through the veil. But beware, the shadows of Elyndor still walk, bound by the moment between two heartbeats. The river's glow dimmed, and Seraphine's form began to fade. Do not linger when the bells of a lost city ring, she warned. When the heartbeat stops, you must choose what to remember and what to forget. Then she was gone, and only the still water remained. Aemon turned to Lyra, his voice low. The ruins of the crystal spire are a day's walk north. We'll need supplies. Lyra nodded, her mind spinning. Aemon, if what she said is true, if I'm the last keeper. He looked at her gently. Then maybe you're the only one who can bring the kingdom peace. They returned to Dareth to gather what they needed. But as they packed, Lyra noticed something strange. The villagers were different. They smiled, spoke, and moved as if in a dream. Their eyes were empty, like reflections without souls. Aemon, Lyra whispered. What's happening to them? He watched a child walk by, humming a song that no one had taught her. The heartbeat's spreading. It's pulling them into its memory. If we don't reach the spire soon, they'll vanish too. That night, as they left the sleeping village behind, Lyra looked back one last time. The mist had swallowed Dareth completely. Only faint lights flickered in the distance, shadows of what once was. The forest ahead seemed endless, but the crystal pendant glowed faintly in her hand, pulsing in rhythm with her heart. Every beat drew her closer to the truth. And somewhere deep within the valley, the buried heart of Elyndor stirred again, waiting for the moment when the world would pause between two heartbeats and remember what it had lost. The forest north of Dareth was older than memory. The villagers called it the Whispering Wood, for those who entered claimed to hear voices calling from the trees. Most never returned. Now, under a gray sky and a wind that smelled of rain and sorrow, Lyra and Aemon stepped into its shadow. The air grew colder the farther they went. The trees stood tall and twisted, their branches reaching like arms frozen mid-motion. The crystal pendant around Lyra's neck glowed faintly, lighting their way with a soft, pulsing light. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, not born of anger, but of fear. Finally, Aemon broke it. Do you believe what Seraphine said? That Elyndor erased itself from memory? Lyra looked at the pendant, then at the mist swirling around their feet. I don't know what to believe, but I can feel it, the kingdom's sorrow. It's like the air itself remembers. They walked for hours until they came upon an ancient stone archway half buried in the ground. The symbols carved into it matched those on Aemon's sword. The air shimmered faintly as they passed beneath it, and suddenly the forest changed. The trees behind them vanished, replaced by a path of glass-like stone that led into a field of floating lights. The sky was no longer gray, but deep blue, scattered with stars that moved like living things. Lyra stopped, her breath catching. Is this? Yes, Aemon whispered. We've crossed the veil. This is what's left of Elyndor. The kingdom stretched before them like a dream half-remembered. Ruins of marble towers glowed faintly in the starlight, and rivers of silver flowed through broken streets. Statues of forgotten kings stood tall, their faces serene and sorrowful. But there was something wrong. The city was silent, too silent. The air carried no sound of life, no wind, no breath. As they walked deeper into the ruins, the ground began to hum faintly, echoing that same steady rhythm, the heartbeat beneath the world. Each pulse made the light flicker. They stopped at the center of what once might have been a grand square. In its heart stood a fountain made of crystal, cracked and dry. Around it lay faded carvings of winged figures holding orbs of light. Eamon knelt beside one of the carvings and brushed away the dust. "The Guardians," he murmured. "They were said to watch over the Forge of Souls." Lyra's voice trembled. "So this is where it all began." Before he could reply, a whisper drifted through the air. Then another. Soon, 1,000 soft voices surrounded them. Echoes of laughter, cries, and songs. Shadows began to appear, faint, translucent figures walking the streets as if unaware of their presence. Lyra watched in awe. Their memories. Eamon nodded grimly. The remnants of Elyndor, trapped between life and forgetting. One of the shadows turned toward Lyra. It was a child with wide, empty eyes. She reached out, but the figure flinched back, its face twisting in pain before fading into mist. Lyra felt a sharp pain in her chest. "They're afraid of me." "Because you're the keeper," Eamon said quietly. "They know you hold the power to release them, or destroy them." Suddenly the ground shook. A deep rumble echoed through the ruins, and a crack split across the square. From it rose a dark mist, thick and heavy. The heartbeat quickened, faster and faster, until it sounded like thunder. Eamon drew his sword, its runes blazing with light. "Stay behind me." From the shadows, something emerged, a shape made of smoke and memories, its eyes glowing faintly red. Its voice was deep and hollow. "You dare walk the halls of the forgotten. The heart is not yours to awaken." Lyra stepped forward, trembling but firm. "Who are you?" "I am the echo of the fallen," it replied. "When Elyndor vanished, I remained, to guard what was left." Eamon raised his sword. "We seek to seal the heart, not awaken it." The echo's voice grew colder. "Sealing, it means ending us. Do you wish to kill what little remains of our world?" Lyra hesitated. The creature's words pierced her heart. "If we don't, the heart will destroy everything again." The echo's form twisted, its voice rising. "Better destruction than forgetting. A world that remembers pain still lives. A world that forgets dies." It lunged toward them. Eamon swung his sword, the light cleaving through the darkness. The echo shrieked and recoiled, but the blow did not destroy it, only scattered it into shadows. Lyra fell to her knees, clutching her pendant. "Please," she whispered, "there must be another way." The shadows around her trembled, and for a moment, the heartbeat slowed. The pendant pulsed with light, and a soft whisper reached her ears, her grandmother's voice. "The heart is not evil, child. It only reflects what it was given. Love it with mercy, and it will rest." Lyra stood, her eyes wet with tears. "Eamon, the heart doesn't want destruction, it wants peace. The people's pain created it, and their sorrow trapped them here." Eamon looked at her uncertainly. "Then how do we free them?" "We have to reach the crystal spire," she said. "That's where the final heartbeat waits." He nodded. "Then we go." They crossed the broken square, the whispers of the lost following them like a ghostly wind. Ahead, through the mist, rose the spire, a towering structure of light, cracked but still standing. Its top reached into the clouds, and with every heartbeat, it glowed brighter. But as they approached, the air around them thickened. The heartbeat grew louder, almost painful. The sky darkened, and the stars above began to fade. Lyra stumbled, clutching her chest. "It's too strong." Eamon caught her before she fell. "Hold on, Lyra. We're close." The spire loomed before them, its entrance sealed by a gate of shimmering glass. Upon it was carved an inscription in glowing letters. Eamon read it aloud. "When the heart beats twice, the kingdom breathes again. Between them lies the price of memory." Lyra looked up at the towering structure, her voice soft but steady. "Then it's true. The kingdom vanished between two heartbeats, when it chose to forget itself." Eamon turned to her, eyes full of worry. "And if we fail to seal it?" She met his gaze. "Then history will repeat, and the world will vanish with it." The gate shimmered, the heartbeat echoing louder and louder until the world around them seemed to blur and pulse with every thrum. And as they stepped through the gate of the crystal spire, the last echoes of Elyndor's lost souls whispered around them. "Remember us before we fade." The moment Lyra and Aemon stepped through the shimmering gate, the world changed. The air inside the crystal spire was heavy and alive, pulsing in time with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, a deep, rhythmic heartbeat that echoed through the glass-like walls. Each beat made the light shift and ripple, like the world itself was breathing. They stood in a vast hall made entirely of crystal. The walls reflected endless versions of themselves, creating the illusion of infinite space. In the center stood a long staircase spiraling upward into a column of light. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the steps, and above them, at the top, pulsed a sphere of living silver, the heart of Elyndor. Lyra could feel it calling to her, not in words, but in emotion, sorrow, longing, and a deep loneliness that wrapped around her soul. Aemon placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with fear and determination. "I think I do, Aemon. The heart won't listen to anyone else." As they began to climb the steps, the hall around them shimmered. The air thickened, and scenes from the past appeared, glowing images like ghosts of memory. They saw Elyndor as it once was, shining towers, crowded streets full of music and laughter, and a king who stood upon a golden balcony with a crown made of starlight. Lyra paused, her breath caught in awe. "It's beautiful." Aemon nodded. "The kingdom that vanished." But as they climbed higher, the images changed. The skies darkened. People screamed. Flames swept through the streets. The same king now stood with a broken crown, clutching the glowing heart in his hands as it pulsed violently. Lyra's voice trembled. He tried to save them. Aemon frowned. Or he tried to control the power and lost everything. The echo of the king's voice filled the hall, ghostly and hollow. "If only we could forget the pain. If only the sorrow could fade." Then the light exploded, and everything turned to mist. The city disappeared, all within the space of 2 heartbeats. Lyra stumbled, her knees weak. That's when it happened, when they wished to forget. Aemon caught her before she fell. They erased themselves. She looked up the staircase. The heart pulsed brighter now, its rhythm quickening. And it's happening again. They reached the final step. Before them, the heart of Elyndor floated in a chamber of glass, suspended by beams of light. It looked almost alive, glowing veins of silver running through it, pulsing like blood beneath skin. As Lyra approached, her pendant began to glow in response. The air filled with whispers, hundreds of voices overlapping, pleading, crying, remembering. "We are the forgotten. We chose peace over pain. Do not wake us." Lyra covered her ears. "It's too much, they don't want to be saved." Aemon stood beside her, his expression grim. "If we leave the heart unsealed, the world outside will vanish just like this one. We don't have a choice." But Lyra shook her head. "No, there's always a choice." She reached out and touched the heart. The moment her hand met its surface, light burst from the chamber, blinding her. She felt herself pulled into another world, a place made of memories. She stood in a vast field of white light. Around her, the people of Elyndor walked like shadows, repeating the same moments over and over, laughter that ended in silence, love that faded before it began. And before her stood the king of Elyndor, his face sorrowful, his crown cracked. "Why have you come, Keeper's child?" he asked gently. "Do you wish to undo what we did?" Lyra bowed her head. "You destroyed your kingdom." The king's voice was soft. "We freed it. The pain was too great. The wars, the loss, every heart was breaking. So we made a wish, that in one heartbeat, all sorrow would vanish. But wishes have a price." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "You erased everything, your people, your memories, your joy. You can't heal by forgetting." The king looked at her sadly. "Then tell me, child of the present, what is better? Endless pain or merciful forgetting? Lyra took a deep breath. Neither. To live is to remember the sorrow, the joy, all of it. Without memory, there is no heart. The king studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You speak with your grandmother's spirit. She said the same before she sealed the forge beneath the river. He reached out and touched her pendant. The heart listens to you now. You can end the cycle, but know this. To seal it, you must offer it something precious. Lyra's voice trembled. What must I give? Your memories, the king said softly. All that you are. Your love, your pain, your name. You will remember nothing. Not your world, not your friends, not even him. Lyra's eyes widened. Amen, the king nodded. Between two heartbeats, you must choose. Remember and let the world fall, or forget and let it live. Lyra opened her eyes. She was back in the spire, the heart still glowing before her. Aemon stood behind her, his sword lowered, his eyes full of concern. What happened? He asked. She looked at him, tears spilling down her face. I know how to seal it, but it will cost everything. Aemon stepped closer. What do you mean? If I seal the heart, I'll lose all my memories. Everything I've ever loved. He shook his head, his voice breaking. No, there has to be another way. There isn't, she whispered. Elyndor's sorrow will only rest when I give it mine. The heart pulsed faster, the light shaking the chamber. Cracks began to form in the crystal walls. Outside, the sky turned blood red, and the heartbeat grew louder and louder, shaking the world itself. Aemon grabbed her hands. Lyra, look at me. Please don't do this. She smiled sadly through her tears. You once told me that no one should carry pain alone. Maybe this is how I keep that promise. He shook his head, his eyes filled with despair. If you forget, then I'll remember for both of us. Lyra touched his cheek gently. Thank you. The light around them intensified. The heart's glow turned blinding white. Lyra lifted her pendant, now shining brighter than ever, and pressed it to the heart. A wave of warmth surged through her. Not pain, but peace. She felt her memories slipping away, her childhood by the river, her grandmother's stories, the sound of Aemon's laughter. She whispered softly, goodbye. And as the heart beat one final time, everything dissolved into silence. When the light faded, the crystal spire stood still. The heart had dimmed to a soft, steady glow. The air was calm. Aemon stood alone in the chamber, his sword hanging at his side. Lyra lay on the floor, her eyes open but empty, like someone who had forgotten the meaning of dreams. He knelt beside her, tears falling silently. Lyra, he whispered, it's done. You saved them. She looked at him with confusion. Who are you? He forced a small smile. Just someone who remembers you. Outside, the sky brightened for the first time in centuries. The ruins of Elyndor shimmered, towers rising again, rivers flowing with light. The lost souls whispered softly, their voices fading into peace. The kingdom remembers. And as the world settled between one heartbeat and the next, Aemon held Lyra close, knowing that though she had forgotten, the world would never forget her. The sun rose over the valley for the first time in 1,000 years. Its light touched the rivers, the fields, and the ruins that now glimmered like glass reborn. The heartbeat that had once shaken the world was silent, not gone, but at peace. Elyndor, the kingdom that had vanished between two heartbeats, breathed once more. At the edge of the crystal spire, Aemon stood with Lyra by his side. She gazed out at the horizon, her face calm and distant. Though her eyes were the same soft gray he remembered, they carried no trace of recognition. She no longer knew his name. For days after the sealing, Lyra had slept in silence, her body weak, her mind empty of all memory. When she awoke, she asked simple questions. Where am I? And who are you? Spoken with the quiet innocence of someone reborn. Aemon had answered each one with patience, even though every word broke his heart a little more. Now, as the morning mist lifted, The kingdom began to hum faintly with life. The ghosts of Elyndor, once trapped in endless echoes, were now gone. Their sorrow had been laid to rest. Aemon looked toward the spire. "You did it, Lyra," he whispered. "You brought them peace." She turned to him, her brows furrowed slightly. "You keep saying that name. Lyra. It sounds familiar, but I don't know why." He smiled gently. "It's yours." She touched her chest, over her heart. "Lyra," she repeated it softly, as if trying to hold onto something fragile. "It feels right." For a moment, she looked at him curiously. "And you? Who are you?" Aemon hesitated. So many answers rushed to his lips. "Your friend. Your protector. The one who loved you." But instead, he said softly, "I'm Aemon. I promised someone I'd stay with you." She smiled faintly, unaware of the tears in his eyes. "Then I'm glad you did." They stayed near the ruins of the spire for many days, building a small camp beside the flowing river. The once dark waters now sparkled like liquid silver. Birds sang again in the trees, and the air no longer felt heavy with sorrow. Aemon spent his time teaching Lyra how to live again, how to start a fire, how to tend to wounds, how to read the stars. She listened carefully, curious about every small thing, like a child seeing the world for the first time. Sometimes, she would stop suddenly and touch her chest, a puzzled look on her face. "Sometimes," she said once, "I feel something, like I'm missing a piece of myself. But I don't know what it is." Aemon had looked at her then, his heart aching. "That missing piece," he said softly, "is love. You gave it away, so others could live." She tilted her head. Love. The word seemed foreign and beautiful on her lips. "I think I'd like to learn what it means again." He smiled through his tears. "Then I'll help you remember." Weeks passed. The world around them began to heal. Flowers bloomed in places where ashes once lay. The villagers of Dareth, those who had vanished into dreams, began to return, their memories hazy, but their hearts full of peace. They didn't remember the kingdom or the tragedy, but they felt lighter, freer. One evening, as the sun set in colors of gold and rose, Lyra and Aemon sat by the riverbank. The same river where everything had begun. The water shimmered with the reflection of the sky, and a gentle breeze carried the faint sound of distant bells. Lyra watched the ripples with wonder. "Do you ever think," she asked quietly, "that some things are meant to be forgotten?" Aemon was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe. But I think some memories aren't meant to stay in the mind. They live in the heart instead. Even if we forget their shape, we still feel them." Lyra smiled softly. "Then I think my heart remembers you." The word struck him like sunlight breaking through clouds. For a long moment he couldn't speak. Finally, he said, "Then maybe that's enough." They sat in silence as the first stars appeared. The world felt new, fragile, and alive, as if reborn from the ashes of dreams. That night, Lyra wandered alone to the base of the crystal spire. The moonlight bathed the structure in silver glow. She placed her hand upon the smooth surface, and for an instant, her pendant, now dim, flickered faintly with light. A soft voice echoed in her mind, gentle and familiar, her grandmother's voice. "You chose well, child. The heart rests, and so does the kingdom. Memory is not lost, it is transformed. What was once pain has become peace." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling warmth bloom within her. "I don't remember who I was," she whispered, "but I feel as though I'm home." "Home is not a place," the voice replied. "It is the space between two heartbeats, where love never truly fades." When the whisper faded, Lyra looked up at the stars. For the first time, she didn't feel lost. The past might have vanished, but something deeper remained, an invisible thread connecting her to all that had been. At dawn, she returned to Aemon's side. He was sitting by the fire, half asleep, the morning light painting his face gold. She sat beside him, her voice quiet but clear. "I had a dream," she said. "There was a kingdom made of light. It vanished, but I think it still lives somewhere here." She pressed her hand to her heart. Aemon looked at her and smiled. "Yes. between two heartbeats. She returned to smile, and for a fleeting moment, something in her eyes, a flicker, a spark, seemed to remember him. Maybe she didn't know his name. Maybe she never would. But in that moment, as their hearts beat in perfect rhythm beneath the rising sun, something deeper than memory bound them. The world was quiet again. The river sang, the trees whispered, and in the distance, the faint ruins of Elyndor shimmered like morning dew, not gone, but finally at peace. And so, the story of the kingdom that vanished between two heartbeats did not end in sorrow, but in silence, the kind of silence that comes after a long sigh when the world finally remembers how to breathe again. Epilogue. Years later, travelers who passed through the valley of Dareth spoke of a strange wonder. On quiet nights, when the moon was full, they said they could hear two faint heartbeats echoing through the hills, one steady, one soft, like the rhythm of a promise that time itself refused to forget. No one knew where the sound came from, but the old folk would smile and say, "That's the sound of a kingdom remembering love." And somewhere in the quiet of the forest, by the silver river, two figures could sometimes be seen walking side by side, a girl with a crystal pendant that glowed faintly, and a man who looked at her as though she were the only thing in the world. They did not speak of the past. They did not need to, for between their two heartbeats, the kingdom still lived.